toutes et à tous. Merci d'être venus d'avoir répondu à notre invitation. Bienvenue au Campus Plex. C'est un lieu qui nous tient beaucoup à cœur pour beaucoup de raisons. Et déjà parce que les personnes qui l'ont fondé nous sont très chères. Et puis l'esprit qu'elles y développent nous est aussi très cher. Et puis aussi pour plein d'autres raisons. Et la dernière d'entre elles parce qu'il héberge une école d'ingénieurs dans laquelle nous venons d'investir à nouveau avec la Banque des Territoires. On en a parlé lundi dans la presse. Et tout ça, c'est pas l'objet de la discussion aujourd'hui, mais tout ça fait que c'est à la fois un lieu et un moment très précieux pour nous. Aujourd'hui, nous recevons Andris. C'est un honneur pour nous de le recevoir et on espère que vous partagerez ce bonheur avec nous. Comment nous avons connu Andris? C'est un petit peu c'est marrant parce qu'en fait, quand il y a quelques années, on espérait que le fonds d'amorçage ALSA sorte. On était un petit peu dans l'expectative parce que c'était dur, ça traînait, la région avait du mal à se mobiliser pour que le fonds fonctionne. Et puis, on continuait à réfléchir et à se demander ce qu'on pourrait faire s'il fonctionnait, s'il sortait, ou si, par extraordinaire, il ne sortait pas. Et puis un jour, Sébastien Simone, il me dit il faudrait peut-être qu'on fasse un fonds pour financer des entrepreneurs tech corse, où qu'ils soient dans le monde. Ah ouais, c'est une bonne idée et tout. Et puis, on dit à Alexandre, qu'est-ce que tu penses de cette idée-là? Alexandre il me dit, mais moi les gars, je connais un mec qui a fait ça en fait. Il s'appelle Andris, et c'est un pote de promo de Stanford. Et donc du coup, c'est comme ça qu'en 2019, la première fois, on a parlé à Andris. Et à l'époque, c'était la fin de la période d'investissement de leur premier fonds. Donc voilà, et on s'était dit que d'une manière ou d'une autre, un jour, on aimerait bien le faire venir. Donc il a fallu attendre un petit peu. Et puis c'est dans le cadre de Corsica.ai, autre projet cher à notre cœur parce que c'est un consortium d'entreprises amis, voire sœurs qui se sont réunis pour essayer de déployer un appel d'offres à projet européen en faveur de l'intelligence artificielle et de la robotique. Donc c'est dans ce cadre-là que nous recevons Andris aujourd'hui. Voilà, je vais laisser la main à Alexandre. En gros, on en a pour 1 heure. Alors il y aurait beaucoup de choses à dire, je ne sais pas si on arrivera à tout dire en 1 heure, mais en tout cas, dans une première partie, Andris va parler sous forme de keynote. Ensuite, il y aura Q&A entre Andris et Alexandre. Dans une dernière partie, vous serez invité à poser le maximum de questions, et puis Andris se prêtera au jeu des questions aussi autour d'un rafraîchissement à la fin. Merci.
Merci Jean-Carl. Je vais dire quelques mots sur Andris, mais je vais passer en anglais puisque c'est le format de cette intervention. Andris maintenant commence à avoir beaucoup assimilé du français et aussi du corse. So I'll switch to English, and I'm very pleased to welcome Andris here in Corsica. He's based in Riga, but has a very interesting global perspective on all the technology investments. Also, he has a very, very exciting perspective on technology investments, not only in the Baltic region, but worldwide. Andris, I've known obviously at Stanford, but he's an entrepreneur at heart. He's worked with various startup companies that were global companies in the US and then in London. He's also been sitting on the board and as an entrepreneur in venture with various venture capital firms. But more interestingly, about 10 years ago, I went back to Riga to start what is Change Ventures. It's a local venture capital fund with the ambition to help the Baltic founders succeed on a worldwide scale, but also because he has it close at heart as well to contribute to the local community of entrepreneurs. In the process, he's not only an entrepreneur, he's also a builder. He has co-founded TechHub Riga, Startup House Riga, and the TechChill series of conferences. Maybe we'll have a chance to talk about those in the Q&A and later during the drinks. But yeah, we'll leave it for now and listen to Andris' keynote. We're very excited to have him here also to show us what someone can do to contribute positively to an ecosystem of companies and help his own country become even more visible on the global scale. So please join me in thanking Andris for coming here and giving us a speech now. Thank you.
We'll do the next one. So thank you. It's fantastic to be here. It's my first trip to Corsica. Alex has taken me to the mountains for 4 days, so I've had the introduction to the true heart of this island, which has been wonderful. And so what I will do is give a little bit overview, some backgrounds, some of the thoughts, key stories, some ideas that we've discussed around what might be applicable for Corsica, and then again, happy to have discussions and questions. And so you can see from the map, this is where we are, those three little states. Latvia is in the middle, where I am from, Estonia in the north, and Lithuania to the south. And we're quite a long way from Corsica, but so you can see the green background. That's what our forests look like. Corsica is more green than I expected, but we're also on small nations fighting for our place in the world, and I think that's one thing that's common with the Corsican islands. So you skip to the next slide. So a little bit of background. So yes, my day job now is in the venture capital fund called Change Ventures. So Change Ventures, we started about 11 years ago to invest in startup teams from across the three Baltic states. And we invested pre-seed and seed, been looking for companies, teams that could build something big and global. And we have a number of investments, I'll talk about some of them, but a number of investments in companies that have grown across the world, and hopefully some which will still grow across the world. So aside from attending Stanford Business School with Alex, after that I spent about 15 years on the operating side of startups. So as VP Marketing Biz Dev, as CMO, as executive in several different startups in the US, Israel, in London, in Scandinavia, in Finland, and also back home in Latvia. One of those, the logo Aeroscout is up there. So this is a company that about 15 years ago pioneered Wi-Fi based asset tracking. So we used Wi-Fi infrastructure to be able to find assets in hospitals, in manufacturing, logistics, and this company was sold to Stanley Black & Decker for about $250 million. It's a good exit. That's where I got to work with Israelis. So you'll see I reference Israel several times in terms of its startup ecosystem. And I think they have fantastic experience and good ideas that are applicable for other small nations. So outside of Change Ventures, you could say my hobby has been working with a number of nonprofit foundations that have been trying to help the startup ecosystem in Latvia and generally in the Baltics. And so Startup House Riga, originally called TechHub Riga, now Startup House Riga, we started about 15 years ago. And it's somewhat similar to this. It's actually not quite as big as this building now, but co-working space, event space, we've been running. We were the first community co-working and event space 15 years ago in Riga. We've been running meetups all that time, and the TechChill conference grew out of our launch party, and now every year it's become a conference for startups and investors, attracting about 2,000 people every year. Where our goal is to bring international investors into Riga to meet them. So one of the key messages, as Alex and I have discussed this over time, is that I think of being a small region as an advantage, right? It's not a disadvantage, it's an advantage. And so each of these countries is a relatively small place where we can build companies that are global. And that's the key message that I'm always repeating locally also, is that the fact that we have a small home market and there aren't millions and millions of consumers to sell to, or millions and millions of businesses to sell to, doesn't mean we can't build a huge business, because outside of our country there is huge markets, right? And that's been the focus. And so to give you a flavor of some of the companies in our region that have been successful, and some of you no doubt will have used some of these services. So Wise is a payments provider that exchanges currencies, now also provides banking service. So these are two Estonians who started this business, originally headquartered in London, but actually the team in Tallinn in Estonia, and is now one of the world's biggest fintech companies, IPO'd on the UK stock exchange, now on NASDAQ. Bolt, no doubt, if you travel around Europe, you will have used the Bolt ride-sharing app. So this was started in Estonia, but actually their initial success was in the African market. So this is back in the days when Uber was trying to expand globally, very aggressively, putting money in every market, hiring expensive people, lobbying politicians. And Bolt, the founder of Bolt, was 19 years old. He didn't have any capital. He was very scrappy. So he basically decided Africa was a market that was untapped. He advertised for local drivers without anyone on the ground. Got some drivers, then advertised for passengers, started to try and get the circle going until Africa actually grew significantly, and they're actually a large player in Africa, and then they started growing in Europe only afterwards. And now they're valued north of 5 billion, very successful ride-sharing company. Vinted is from Lithuania. They're used clothing marketplace, e-commerce player. The secret behind their success is logistics, actually, in terms of making that logistics exchange for their customers in the marketplace work. Aerons, we'll talk about in a moment in a bit more detail. This is a company we've invested in. It's a world leader in applying robotics to cleaning, inspecting, and repairing wind turbine blades. NordVPN, Lithuanian company, one of the world leaders in VPNs and security software. Pipedrive, Estonian CRM player, also from the region. And Printify, another of our investments, is one of the leading print-on-demand players, where you can you can host an e-commerce site with t-shirts, caps, ball, mugs, and everything, with your brand on it, and when someone orders, they'll print and drop ship it just for you. And that, the world leaders in that space are from Latvia, right? You would not have thought, but yes, they are. And so these are some examples of the companies that have been successful from this region, and what are some of the key things that are important. So as I said, global market focus. So all of these companies have been looking for much bigger markets than back home from day one and trying to crack those. And Pipedrive is a good example. So they built a CRM software. Now there were many players in the market, but they happened to find some excited new users in Brazil. And Brazil became their first big market that grew, and then they grew into other markets and eventually player in the US and Europe, elsewhere. But it wasn't because they had many users in Estonia, right? It was because they found Brazil a very big market. So global market focus is one. The second is doing everything in English in day one. So like it or not, we're very proud of our Latvian language, which only about 1 million people speak in the world, but English is the language that the world communicates in most, and it's certainly the language of tech. And so our companies are doing everything in English from day one, and that's helpful to make sure that habit is there right from the start. The third is capital efficient growth. So it's harder to get investment for your startup idea in the Baltic states than maybe in London or in the US. So you figure out how to do things with less money, and that's a habit that then becomes useful. So if people compare Bolt to Uber raised an absolute ton of money, hundreds and hundreds of millions, to grow across the world. Bolt has raised, I think, 10 or 20 times less money and been very successful. So you can still build a successful company. Just having money doesn't necessarily mean it's the only way to success. The fourth one I listed here was a chip on the shoulder. So that's an English term for, I need to prove something, right? And our founders are trying to prove something. So we regained our independence. So for those who don't know the history, Latvia was independent from 1918 till the Second World War. We were then occupied by the Soviet Union for half a century. We regained our independence in 1991. So all the young entrepreneurs who are alive today is the first generation who can freely build businesses, go where they want to go, travel and so forth. And they have a chip on their shoulder. They want to prove that they can do this just as well as the Americans, the British, the French, whoever else, right? And so this drive to prove themselves is one of the things that we think is valuable. And the last one is copy the Israeli model. So Israel, as a small state, has been very successful, you could argue the most successful in the world in building a startup community. And the lessons that we see there apply very much to our community. And the way I would summarize them, the way I've pitched my fund to investors in the fund is that when you come from a small market, so firstly you have to sell to big markets, and if your founders can do the mental leap to focus on really big markets and customers, that's the first step. And then when there's success, that small community is much tighter and closer to each other. And so that feedback cycle of success to the next success happens much faster. And that's what we've seen in Israel, also a small and tight community. And that's what can happen in a small place. And I'll talk about that more. But that's a summary of some of the key thoughts here. And then I think the next slide, we get it there, will be about Aarons. And I'll talk about one example of a company. This is a company that I'm on the board of that we backed. So what you can see in the photo here is a robot which is lifted up by a winch onto a wind turbine blade and can be moved anywhere on the blade using a winch system, and can then clean, inspect, repair, actually sand down, paint wind turbine blades. So that's what they do today. When they started, these founders had no idea 7 years ago about the wind industry at all. They'd never worked in the wind industry. What they did was they built a heavy lift industrial drone. So a big drone with, 6 propellers that could lift heavy weights. And in order to, because they were excited about the prospect of drones and what could be done with them. They lifted up a person who jumped from a drone with a parachute. And this was the first time in the world it was done. They filmed it, put it on YouTube, it went viral. And Y Combinator, the accelerator in San Francisco, saw the video and emailed them and said, hey, this is cool, why don't you come and talk to us about joining YC? So they went to YC and they didn't really know what to do with this. And they were looking for applications for this heavy lift industrial drone. And they randomly met a helicopter pilot who said that his job, all he did, his work with his helicopter was to fly near a wind turbine blade, and someone would wash down the wind turbine blade. And they're like, whoa, if it's worth sending a helicopter to do this must be a really big, expensive problem. So they started looking deeper, and they found that there's roughly $40 billion worth of services sold every year to inspect, maintain, and repair wind turbine blades. So that's a very big global market. In Latvia, we have maybe 50 wind turbines, so there's not a big market. But globally, huge market. So they started investigating how they could use this drone to perform the same service, and eventually figured out that the drone wasn't needed. It's much better to attach it to the wind turbine with these winches. And they built this business, and the secret to their success was being obsessive about understanding what the customer problem is. They didn't come from the industry, but they understood you need to fix these problems on the blades. How are you doing it today? There are people hanging on alpine climbing ropes, doing it by hand. That's very dangerous, inefficient, expensive. So they spent all this time building a prototype, convincing the customer to let them try it, improving it very, very quickly. They failed, they had robots drop down in front of a customer, all sorts of problems along the way, but persisting in doing that, and along the way we invested. We helped get about $70 million in capital for this company to grow, and now it's the world leader in applying robotics to this problem. And really the secret was, don't be afraid to go talk to big global customers, find some way to convince someone to let you try this. Try it, fail, learn quickly, retry it, and eventually succeed, right? And so they're a great example of what, having the confidence to believe that you can do it, and going out and having the ambition to do this has led them to be a very successful company. The next slide is back to sort of ecosystem. So what does this mean in the broader context? I'm not sure that the words are big enough to be able to read. But basically, this is what I was talking about, the Israeli model, how these ecosystems develop. So you have a founder that succeeds in building something very big and global. And in your case, Good Barber is a great example here of a company that's been very successful. It's even accelerated if they have an exit where they can sell part or all of the company and reinvest the capital. They become angel investors and supporters of the community. And we see I mentioned these companies earlier, so the various founders and early investors of these companies have been involved in the community, reinvesting. And because the community is small and many people know each other, they become mentors to the next founders who are starting the next companies, who are using those networks to succeed faster. And that cycle goes faster and faster. And that's what we've seen in these countries, and that's why I'm very optimistic about the future for us, because this cycle just keeps increasing, right? As you have more success, that success rolls into the next project. So that's how we see that, and maybe some thoughts. Final slide. Some thoughts on what this might mean for Corsica, as I see some similarities here in terms of the way you have a small local market, you have a distinct identity locally, then you have connections with the local government that can help accelerate the development here. We're getting there. So I think when I come here and I see this beautiful space, I think this is an example of one of the core things that we've been looking at, which is a space that physically brings together companies and where you run events, right? So events like this, where the community can get together, people can learn from each other, you can get inspired. And these larger events that I show here, TechChill, which is the one where I'm a co-founder, we run every year. Latitude 59 is the biggest event in Estonia. These are then the bigger events every year that bring in many more investors from overseas. That we have a pitch competition, so the best startups get showcased to those investors. We bring in entrepreneurs to tell their stories that then inspire the next founders who have not yet maybe started a business or just starting a business. They can learn something, they can be inspired to try, have more ambition. And also importantly, at these events, we bring in government officials, corporates locally, so bigger companies locally, who could then potentially help the community, and they then get exposed to what this startup scene is. So these are events that I think are very important, and part of the importance is simply meeting face to face. So we still, even though many of these are digital companies, the face-to-face meeting is important, because trust between people who are working together is a key reason for success. So then this last slide what this could mean for Corsica, as I see these similarities, you already have this core of successful companies and founders like Sébastien, giving back to the community, supporting with this space, with FemuQuì, the fund. You have the first sort of base of this, and there's a couple of things that I discussed with Alex that I thought were things to throw out that I think are important. So one is English language that I already mentioned, right? So this is something that is quite strong in each of the Baltic states, the training in English, and that definitely helps succeed. And in fact, there's one other small example. In Estonia, they actually have a long tradition of sending young people to do door-to-door sales in the US after they finish high school for a summer. And there's a program that's been sending people every year. This is the hardest sales you can do. So they're selling, I can't remember, some kind of books. But that's really hard sales training. But if you do that as a young person in the USA, you have great training, you develop the language skills that then are very useful for you to later be able to develop a successful business. The second is the conferences I mentioned. We run TechChill somewhere between February and April. 1 year it was minus 20 degrees when we ran the conference. We still managed to get international investors to come in and entrepreneurs to come in. You have a fantastic advantage here with the beautiful weather, so I'm sure it's possible to run a very attractive startup conference here. You have a much easier time attracting people in that respect. But I think those are important. And one of the things that's been valuable about those in terms of them functioning, they're run as non-profits. So these are not for-profit conferences. We are not making any money. The board is all donating its time. And that means that we focus on the mission. We're not interested in just making it as big as possible to earn money. We're focused on making it the place where startups and investors can meet. And that is still being the focus. So we've capped the size. It's not going to get any bigger. But that's because we have a mission. And the last idea to throw out there, it's from Lithuania. For those of you who haven't been to the Baltic states, probably many of you, we have one bigger airline, which is in Latvia. Very lucky for us. So we have lots of direct flights, but the Lithuanians and Estonians don't have a lot of direct flights. So the the local government in Vilnius, the capital of Lithuania, actually set up a subsidized flight to London every few days for the purpose of making sure that you can have stronger connections to Europe's one of the biggest financial centers. And so those kind of travel improvements is something that can be important for startups to be able to develop. And I've had founders who have said, yeah, for me to be able to go raise money, talk to investors, customers, that service to London has been important. So these are some big ideas, but maybe Alex has other questions for me, and we can also go on with questions from the audience. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Andris. Thanks, Andris, for this presentation. Very, very insightful. I have plenty of questions, but I had lots of personal answers in talking to you in the last few days, but I would still like to find a few questions of interest to the audience. One of them, obviously, you have lived internationally. You made a point to come back to your home country. And when you are talking to entrepreneurs who live worldwide from the Baltic states, or from the Baltic-based entrepreneurs, how do you entice them to go global if they're from the Baltics or to come home to some extent, like you did, to start something of interest for the Baltic countries?
So, in some sense, ambitious founders don't need so many enticements to go somewhere and try and build something big, go find customers, live for a while somewhere else. a lot of them also don't need that much enticement to come back. The good reasons to go travel the world are to find other experiences, find bigger customers, bigger investors than you can back home. And the reasons to come back home are a lot around, because it is home, it's where your family is, and we're seeing now that this, so founders are seeing that other founders have moved to the US for a while, then come back. We even had some stories. We had one of the first exits in Latvia. It was a startup that was bought by an American company, and the two founders and a few team members moved to the US. And the press was all like, oh my God, they're all gonna leave, that's what happens. You get bought by an American company, everyone leaves. And I'm like, wait, let's see. A couple of years went by, they're all back, right? And they're telling the story that actually it's much easier to scale your team at the home, because if you take all of your development team to San Francisco, now you have to compete with Google, Facebook, everyone else in the valley for your talent, right? And that's a much harder story. You might have to double or triple your salary bill if you take all that team there. So it doesn't make sense, right? And so when the companies start back home, when they have the core of their engineering and operations there, it very rarely leaves, even if they're headquartered elsewhere, even if they have an exit, because it makes sense to build that team there. You may add sales and marketing team somewhere else, you may add another base for more development, but it's actually not that hard to convince people to come back.
That's an interesting point. So once you've attracted or you spotted those entrepreneurs that you want to back, how can you help them locally? And is that a good thing to help them locally by providing them with use cases for those businesses? Or how do you figure out the map for building those companies?
Yeah, so we had this discussion, and one of the things that also our local governments tell us is, hey, we want to set up sandbox environments to test new technologies. Our local companies could maybe be the first pilot customers. And as much as I would like to say yes, usually I say, I'm not that interested. I would rather that this founder from Latvia do the hard work to find a customer in the UK, in Sweden, in Germany, in the USA, which is much harder, but rather they do that from day one and focus on bigger potential customers that could grow into something much larger as a business. And we've seen several also companies we've invested in who initially said, well, we're going to work initially with local customers and then we'll expand, and they kind of get stuck. They get used to serving customers that are locally, they can talk to them face to face, they can ask a friend for an introduction, and it becomes too easy, and then they go to the next small market and they never grow this muscle that enables them to go to a really big market. And so I'm actually in favor of pushing them to really big markets from day one, as early as possible. And yes, it's harder, but it really makes the company something completely different if you can succeed. And it may not be the first time you succeed, it may take you several tries, right? But once you succeed, you can build something really, really big.
And that's the flywheel effect we're showing.
Exactly.
And so talking about the next stage, so those companies are growing, what attention or you put on their exit strategy, what remains in the Baltic countries as opposed to being sold to a foreign buyer? Is it something you consider when you look at those exits?
Yeah, so as a fund investor, we have to invest money and we need to then sell our shares to get hopefully a lot more money back for our investors, right? So we need to exit. And it actually is very useful for the community if the founders also exit at least part of their position at some point and are able to reinvest in that community. But that doesn't mean that even if a bigger US company or UK company buys the startup, that suddenly everything disappears. Because usually they're buying capabilities, a team, and they want to keep that there and grow it as a new base of operations. And what we also see is that when investors invest locally, they start coming regularly, they go to board meetings, and they start looking for other investments, and they tend to find other companies, other founders that they can back, and so start doing multiple investments in that region. So these are all multipliers that will help the ecosystem grow. So we don't really worry about those exits in that sense.
That's something you've tracked over the years, though, or is it something that you eventually will bring some value back to the country?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you put your country perspective on, so if I think from the policymakers, the government, actually the main tax benefit that comes from startups being successful is actually social taxes. So having employment and people paying, and companies paying social tax for the employees is the biggest tax base that comes. So many of our companies have their headquarters in another country because the investors will say, whoa, Latvian law, I don't know what that is. I need to then go and investigate. I don't know how the courts work. So let's just, start the company or invest in a company which is registered in Delaware or in London or wherever. That's easier for them. And yes, at some point when the company makes profits, those profits will be taxed in that country. But by that point, the vast majority of benefit that the country gets is from social taxes because they're employing a lot of people. So Aeron's, it's a great example. They employ 540 people now, probably 450 of them in Latvia. They're paying a lot of taxes, right? And the country is gaining. The customers are all elsewhere. The customers are paying them, and the flow through is in taxes. So we see huge benefits, and our government is starting to understand that yes, it would be nice to have headquarters here, but actually it doesn't matter so much.
Interesting perspective. Let me ping you on something somewhat different than that. On the weekends, some of us go hiking in the mountains or they go trail running. You have done other things on the weekends, also because you take your country's existence at heart as well. Your country has not always been independent. And so I'd like you to tell us what it takes as well to get involved in those social activities, and also if there are any connections between what you do on the weekends and maybe what can be observed on the startup scene in terms of technologies and how you combine the two sides of your brain.
Sure. So what Alex is talking about is about 11 years ago when Crimea was in Ukrainian Crimea was invaded by Russia. I signed up to join the National Guard. This is a volunteer army service in Latvia, and I do probably around 15 to 22 days of service every year. Initially joined an infantry unit, then damaged my knees, then learned to drive a truck, so now I drive a military truck. Actually what I do is a lot of recruiting because most of the volunteers are younger, and I'm trying to help explain why I think military duty is something very beneficial for an individual in terms of learning discipline, being in an environment where you're pushed way beyond your comfort zone, and you learn that you can expand that comfort zone hugely. And obviously, it's important for us to be able to defend our country. We can't ask NATO forces to, defend on our behalf if we're not ready to fight, right? And we have a neighbor that is not very friendly to us and is threatening us, and so we need to be ready to defend it. So now with the full invasion in Ukraine and the war going on, it's also meant there's a very great interest in developing defense tech, so technology to help defend our country. And as someone who was active in the National Guard, I was immediately also trying to understand what could we do locally with smart engineers to build that. And so I did, also our fund invested in one of the successful drone technology startups in Latvia, which actually has just 2 weeks ago signed a contract to sell counter drone systems to France as well. So France will also benefit from this. And this is a company that it's actually two founders I know from their previous startups. So they developed a drone that would track action sports activities. So if you're skiing or snowboarding or something and you want a drone to film you, they developed a drone that would automatically follow you in the sky and be able to film you doing these things. You can put it on Instagram and so forth. So that was their previous business, and they ended that. They sold that just around the time the invasion was happening, and they realized that they have a lot of experience which could be applicable to building drones. So we invested in that company. We've helped them be able to get their business going, and doing training on the weekends in that environment gives you a better perspective for what it means to actually deploy technology to the military. It's a very different and quite difficult market to sell to, and so that's been useful in definitely in understanding that.
Thanks for sharing the perspective as well. At this point, I'd like to open to questions from the audience, debate, if anyone wants to ask a question.
So one of your recommendations for our region was to organize startup conferences. So let's say next year, FemuQuì will organize one, and we will try to invite international investors like you. So what do you recommend? How should we pitch you in order to convince you to come here? What would you like to hear or see in Corsica in order to make you come here? And maybe invest. The free flights are included.
Yeah, so I think there's two parts to it, right? So ultimately, if you're talking about attracting investors, they would like to see some companies they could potentially invest in, right? So they'll want to understand, who are the local companies, what kind of funding they might need for what kind of businesses. That'll be the first thing. There needs to be at least a chance that they could find some company they could invest in. But actually, the other part of it is a lot of investors, they simply want to go to a new place, explore that. And TechChill, we actually do a lot of work with the investors to try and just make them have a great experience in general. So for the speakers and the investors, we invite them to, it's always on a Thursday, Friday, we invite them to stay the weekend. We'll take them to, so we love sauna in the countryside, so they'll take them to the countryside, they'll take them to a sauna, they'll see how beautiful that is, and you simply want to also get them emotionally excited about the place. And maybe the first trip they won't find someone they want to invest in, but they'll be like, that was such a great trip, and I want to go back again, right? And so that's, I think, a big part of it is simply making them excited about being at that event and coming back again. But ultimately, you do want to try and find a match in terms of investors finding companies to invest in. And we have a number of cases where investors have flown in, they've met a founder there and then done an investment. And you can actually see that connection. But I think both of those parts are very important. So I think there was someone further back up there, maybe. Raise their hands.
À partir de quel moment À partir de quel moment je suis considéré comme une entreprise lettonne ou
So a Latvian company for us is one where the founders are based in our community. Okay, so as a fund, we deliberately said we can invest in companies that are registered anywhere globally. They might be US headquartered, they might be UK, but what's important for us is that the founders are close to our community, and that's the advantage that we have is we can, if I meet someone, I can ask 10 other people, have you worked with them in the past? Do you know them? What's been your previous experience? So we can reference those founders, we can meet them very regularly, so it's important that they're connected to our community, and that's how we define who's local. But we have investments in companies where all the founders are actually living. For example, we backed a Lithuanian startup where all the founders were living in Spain at the time. But they came back regularly, we got to meet them, we could connect with them. So it's are they part of the community is what's important for us. And I know you have a Corsican diaspora, there are Corsicans all over the world, so they can be very tightly connected to your community, and they can be a very important asset.
Bonjour et merci pour votre présentation. Dans votre présentation, vous parlez de recopier le modèle israélien. Donc selon vous, quelles sont les spécificités de ce modèle les plus transposables à un territoire méditerranéen comme la Corse?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think it's the aspects of also a small local market which forces the founders to go global from day one, to look for bigger markets. And secondly, it's this small community where a successful founder can be closely connected to the next potential founders. And so the example I often give is if you're a founder in the UK and you want to meet the founders of Stripe, one of the most successful fintech startups in the world. It's actually two Irish guys who founded it. You want to meet the Stripe founders. They might be at Web Summit, they might be at Slush, all these huge conferences. Like, good luck meeting them, right? They're somewhere in the VIP area, it's very hard to catch them. If you go to Latvia, the founder of Printify is walking down the corridor. I mean, he's meeting people, they're accessible, right? And so the next founders can more easily meet someone who's been there and done that, built something big, which allows them to get those connections, that advice, that input, and so they're more likely to be successful. And this is exactly how Israel works. Israel, of course, you know, the Jewish culture is very closely connected. People help each other, so that's very helpful. But just simply the size makes a big difference, and so we try and leverage the same thing. Obviously, with our events, we're trying to put people together in that physical form, but the size really makes a difference. There's one other aspect which people will say correctly is very important for Israeli success, which is the way they run their military operations. So they have elite units where young people get trained as they're signed up for military service, and that's where they form very close bonds, and you see many companies with people who have served in the same units. As I said, unfortunately for us, we have to develop our military, but that may also be a side benefit that we have similar opportunity where people who do military service can get to know each other in this environment, build strong friendships, and then later build businesses that are successful, partly because of that experience.
Thanks for your presentation. It's a coincidence that I'm here because I'm from Austria.
I was going to say you didn't sound local accent.
And it's like Corsica, and I'm here with my colleague. I'm a forest engineer, and for me it's a big goal to protect our forest landscapes, because we have a big problem in the Alps in Austria due to the climate change, and it's a big challenge to do this. And we are in a group, we have many ideas, and when we present our ideas and these ideas walks, we test this and we present this. But now I'm looking I need a professional help to market this, because as an example, I have a dog, and we can detect bark beetles or insects, and it walks, and with a combination with a human being, with animals, and with the drones, and in all this combination, it walks. And when we present our idea, they say, yes, okay, it walks, beautiful or great, something else, but then we need a help to sell this for us it's we have a limit, and it's not possible to take the next step. So I need a professional help.
Yeah, so I think this is not an uncommon situation in many instances, and it's why I sometimes get asked the question, what's more important, the idea behind a company, a startup, or the execution of doing that? And as much as the ideas are fantastic, 99% is execution, is actually taking that idea and being able to put it in a form that a customer will pay for it. And in your case, maybe it's local governments in various places where they're protecting forests. Maybe there are companies that are managing forests that would find this useful. But the key is to be able to take this technology and package it in something that can be sold. And that's actually the hardest part of building a startup that scales, is the commercial side, right? So ideas, science, and so forth are all important, but unless you organize that in terms of what is the product, how can I communicate it, what is the price, how do I sell it, through which channel, is it direct, through resale, all of these things, the commercialization is the key. And so usually in startups that we back, we like to see that there are several founders. Maybe one has very strong engineering skills to build the product, and the other has strong business skills to go sell it. And you need that combination. So, but these kind of places are the places where you find the founders, the other founders, to complement your skills. And so that's why these communities and these events are important, because ultimately you want these founder teams to form that have the complete set of skills to succeed.
Thank you. I'm Sébastien Gilabert, the CEO of a startup named Misha. You have numerous international companies in your portfolio. What is your initial advice for Iceland-based company looking to conquer the world? And is the US market, often the first choice of young CEO, still the best way for the internationalization, expansion, or does Europe still does have a role to play?
Yeah, so if I understood right, the question is how do I advise them to get to new markets, and is the US the most exciting market? Yes, am I understanding that? So back when I was at this company called Aeroscout, this is almost 20 years ago now, the US was really the only biggest market for technology by far. That's changed. So what we see is that depending on what your business is, it might sometimes be a great idea to go straight for the US market, because maybe the most sophisticated customers are there, the biggest clients potentially, or for example, we have one company that targets entertainment studios, movie studios, merchandising businesses, and the US is in a different league there, right? So we just keep telling them, go to the US, go to the US, go to the US. There are other startups for whom Europe is a much more attractive market for various reasons, and then we would rather they spend their time on Europe and forget about the US, and maybe do that later. So now it really depends. And the examples I gave here, Pipedrive found their first big market in Brazil, Bolt found their first big market in Africa, right? It's no longer that the US is the only place where you can find a big market. There are big markets in lots of places in the world, right? Also Asia, right? There are lots of huge Asian markets too.
Okay, thank you.
Let me try another question, which is building on the last two questions as well. To what extent as companies grow, they require more capital? To what extent do external funders of companies rely on you to be catalytic or vet those companies before they can invest in them? Do they look at you and they ask you for advice? Are you often the point of contact for those companies?
Yeah, so yes is the answer, the short answer, and we also deliberately designed our fund to be focused on that, so that we are a local investor, and that is important. So Western European or US investors will often be much more comfortable if they have someone else who has skin in the game, who has money invested in the company, who is local. They know, for example, the local laws. They can find out, if something, they can find out a reference check, about these people. Those overseas investors will be more comfortable. So having a local investor alongside is important. And actually today, I got a message from one of our companies that is raising capital. They've gone to Western Europe, and one of those Western European investors pinged back someone they knew back in Latvia, said, hey, do you know these guys? Have you worked with them? Should we talk to them, right? And so investors talk a lot to other investors, and definitely having someone close by makes the investors overseas more comfortable that they can manage that, because they don't need to worry about some of those things. And even for bigger companies, so with Airons, for example, we've raised over $70 million in capital. I'm on the board along with two US investors, one big UK fund, and the founders. But I'm the one that can go to the office, I can have coffee with the CFO, with other people in the team. I know them, I can communicate in their language, so I get a different view of what's happening in the company. And those American or British investors are very happy that they have someone with that view, because they don't see them as often. They value that local connection. So I think that's one of the key things that local investors can bring to the game.
And that should in turn bring sales opportunities. So if you have investors from outside the region, they can also help with other markets and growing the company's business. I think we're almost close to oh, so there's another question. Okay. This.
Hi. I have a question regarding your advice about being global. As you said, it might be a lot more complicated, or you have to get out of your comfort zone. I was wondering if you advise that to see if the people are, let's say, they're able to do it, and then maybe you invest later, or you how do I say, you go with the people before they try to do the big jump.
I think I understand the question, and so it's a very good question, and so it depends what stage investor you are. So we invest at pre-seed and seed. In fact, our last fund is only pre-seed, almost, I would say, angel stage investments, so very, very early. And we would absolutely invest before someone has proven that, if we have confidence that they should be able to do it, right? Maybe they've done something similar in a previous business, or we simply have known the founder enough that we have confidence they will be able to. But yes, we will. But not every investor will. So many investors, and especially, and this is maybe specifically the point I was making earlier about having local customers or international customers. So if you're raising seed or a Series A funding, so not the very first funding, but the next round of funding for, let's say, a London investor, it's much more valuable for them that you've sold your product to, I don't know, a small business in Germany from here, right? Than it is that you've sold it to a big business in Corsica, right? Because it's much harder to get to that German business. And even if that might be a smaller contract, it demonstrates a lot more about your ability to go out and find that business, right? And so that's why I typically say, I think it's, it seems like you should look locally and then go, but often the best thing to do is to grit your teeth and really try and find that international customer or consumer user base, try to market to consumers elsewhere, and it will leave a much bigger impact on investors if you're looking for follow-on funding. Yeah, and yourself, of course, yes.
Thank you.
Sure.
Bonjour, merci. En français, c'est un peu plus facile. Vous avez accompagné beaucoup d'entreprises et j'imagine qu'il y a dû avoir quelques échecs parmi les startups. Et est-ce qu'il y a des types d'erreurs communes à ces échecs parmi les startups, les erreurs commises par les entrepreneurs?
Yeah, so to give you the numbers, we invested from our funds in 45 companies. During the last 11 years. Of those 45, about 10 have already gone out of business, 0 back, done. And we expect probably another 10 at least to go out of business. So, our expectation is that somewhere between 30 and 45% of the investments we make will be in companies that don't make it. That said, we've actually invested in founders a second time after the first company didn't make it, right? Because we do believe that you can learn things. Failure is actually a very good tool. Now, in terms of the causes of failure, so this is the most important thing, is to actually learn why things didn't work out. And the best founders are ones who are very self-aware and who look very openly at their own failures and their own decisions that weren't correct, where they could have done better. One of the things that we see is this market focus, so not going early enough to a bigger market, right, and getting stuck in a smaller market. And those typically might not be write-offs completely. Maybe you can build a small business, but you won't build a big business if you can't get out of a local small market. I think the second, or really the main cause that we see for a lot of the failures is founders not being able to get on with each other all the way through the journey. Right? This is a hard thing to do, build a very big, fast-growing company. And so we do see a number of instances where the founders are not able to keep together as a team, and that can cause a company to fail, right? That's also where we get involved as investors, in some senses, counselors sometimes, right, to try and help the founders get there. But you find that as a company grows, sometimes one of the founders' skills is no longer as important as one of the other founders' skills, and so they don't feel that they're doing the same kind of valuable work. So these are challenges to negotiate and relationships to rebuild over time. And that is definitely one of the hard things that we find. And that's why having, we look for founder teams where the founders do have open communication with each other, where they're able to discuss things, also the hard things, what's going well, what's not going well. And we look at that founder dynamic before we invest and try and make sure that that's strong. And that's why also a team that has succeeded together before, maybe in a completely different context, maybe they're even, I don't know, they've done sports together or something, right? They've worked together. That's a strong indication that they could maybe survive a startup journey.
Thank you. I was wondering regarding AI, right? How do you currently considering and investing around companies that are using AI or not? And is it something that you see becoming a really strong key factor, having AI inside the company?
So every company now is using AI, and the only question is how much you're using it in your business. I think actually right now it's actually a very hard time to invest, I think, because of that. And it's hard to understand how much the availability of these large language models, of the AI tools, how much it will change company building, right? And we've seen some examples of some companies growing fantastically fast. It's not yet clear that that revenue will remain at those levels, right? And what the longer term outcome will be. What is clear is that AI will enable companies to operate many of the processes internally, and communications and software building and so forth in a radically different way. And we definitely see some of our best companies really looking inside hard at how they operate, especially the role of software development and product. So the people who are working as product managers and their role together with software developers, that is really changing. And you see that people who are software developers that can think about product well can become much more capable, and people who are product managers who can't think about how to build software sometimes are not needed anymore. And so these changes can be quite dramatic, and I would say everyone is on a learning journey here. And I think many of the investors who think they know all the answers don't know all the answers, certainly including me.
Well, thank you. I think we're running out of time. So if you have any more questions, just feel free to talk to Andris after this session. We're going to have a few drinks next door. Please join me in thanking Andris for coming here. Andris, it was a real pleasure to host you.